The Toyota LandCruiser Nissan Patrol rivalry is something that spans 7 decades. Ever since both these Japanese companies started manufacturing their own versions of Jeeps at the end of the 1950s. Here in 2021, both companies have been celebrating 70 years of their respective nameplates. What we've got here is the Toyota LandCruiser Sahara against the Nissan Patrol TIL, both up near the top spec models in their range, but the Sahara now is not the top of the line LandCruiser. There is now the GR Sport and the Sahara ZX above it. The big difference here is that the LandCruiser Sahara sells for $130,000, whereas the Patrol TIL is a little bit under $100,000. But spec for spec, they're almost like for like. So let's get them out and see how they compare. The 300 series LandCruiser might be all new, but it still really is an evolution of what we've had before. Yes, it's the new chassis, new V6 engine, new body with aluminium panels and everything, but dimensionally it's still very much the same car. It still feels like a LandCruiser, there's no disguising that. And straight away when you get into this car, you know you're in a Toyota LandCruiser. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's always been a good car. You can see why these are the choice for people travelling in the outback. The V6 diesel engine, everyone's concerned about it, you know, because they don't have a V8 option anymore, but this engine is a sweetheart. It's 700 Newton meters of torque, plenty of grunt, very smooth, very quiet, more efficient than the V8, and more power and torque than the V8, so it's a win-win situation there. Sure, you don't have that V8 roar, but it's a small price to pay. More fuel efficient too, so you're going to be saving money at the pump. That V8 diesel was never a particularly efficient engine. The 10-speed automatic transmission certainly helps there as well. You've got 3 overdrive ratios there, the top 3 gears. And it's not until you're getting up over 110 k's an hour that you're getting into 10th gear unless you want to select it manually. The suspension design is still typically LandCruiser. Coil sprung IFS up front and a live axle at the back on coils. There's no fancy hydraulics or height adjustment on this Sahara spec vehicle. It's just plain, good, solid, outback ready LandCruiser suspension package. And it's a typical Toyota suspension in that it's soft, compliant, rides nicely, gives you pretty good wheel travel. It's not a car that likes to be driven hard and fast. It wallows and bounces a bit. It's a four-wheel drive and not a performance car. There's no pretenses of having a performance car here. Here in the driver's seat, it's still very spacious, comfortable. They've dropped the window lines down, which is something I like. It gives you a much better view out through the front windscreen and the sides of the vehicle. It gives the cabin more of an open air feel, gives you more space. The seating position is lower than it was in the 200. I'm looking more toward the center of the windscreen now, whereas I used to be looking up higher. The big difference here between the LandCruiser and the Patrol is when you get into the back seat. I set both cars up with my preferred driving position, which is pretty much the seat all the way back and down at its lowest. And that leaves me with no knee room behind this seat. In the Patrol, you've still got knee room there, much more space in that back seat. And then behind the third row seat, you've got more space again, which you don't have in the LandCruiser. The new V6 diesel engine is a 3.3 litre twin turbo diesel with what they call a hot V. That means that the turbochargers are mounted up in the valley of the engine between the cylinder heads, where you'd normally have the engine intake system. And now the intake manifolds are on the sides where you'd normally have the exhaust manifolds. That gives the turbochargers closer run to the exhaust ports, so there's less chance of having lag there, and it makes the engine more compact so you don't have turbochargers on the outside of it. The big change for Toyota is that because you've got those hot turbos up there on top of the engine, they can't mount the intercooler up there, so the intercoolers are now mounted up the front of the car behind the grille, just underneath the headlights. There's one on each side. For people travelling in the outback, anywhere where you're likely to hit a kangaroo or tree stumps, anything like that, puts them in more vulnerable to damage. Like your radiator, you really need to have a good bull bar to protect that up the front of the car. Like most Toyotas, there's plenty of tech inside here. You've got a massive screen now, 12-inch diagonally across, And that's configurable, so you can have the map on one side and your audio controls on the other, or your climate control on one side and map on the other. Just swap it over to make it easier for the passenger to control it, or the driver, whatever you need. They double up a bit on the climate controls. You got it in the screen and then on the buttons directly below it, so that's a bit of a novelty act. Strange thing we found, in some light you get a really bright glare off these silver buttons. It comes back at you straight in the face when you go to look to adjust your aircon controls. So something that no one probably picked up now until we started driving them out in the Australian sunlight. One thing's for certain, this V6 diesel engine's got plenty of pickup. You put your foot down and it's pushing you back in. It gets up and boogies straight away. We'll get into a corner here, put your foot down. Sweet as, lovely thing to drive. You could really soak up the outback miles, and that's something that the Japanese engineers said that they wanted to do. After driving around Australia in a group of 200 series, the Japanese found they couldn't believe the long miles we did in a day. So they wanted to make the car easier and more comfortable to drive, less tiresome over long days behind the wheel, covering thousands of outback kilometres. What Toyota's achieved with this 300 series is they've raised the bar over the previous model, but it isn't a game changer at all. It's a better car in every aspect. It doesn't set the world on fire. It doesn't give the other car companies to say, hey, we're going to go and do that next. It's no wild new technologies in it, nothing super exciting, but just keeping that one step ahead of the competition to maintain their sales title, where they're still selling more than 5 times as many Nissan Patrols in Australia. That might change now with the value option. This is $131,000, where the Patrol TIL we've got here is just a little less than $100,000, and that $30,000 buys you a lot of accessories or a lot of fuel or almost a trip around Australia. It's a big difference. The ride quality in this 300 series is top rate. You can't complain about it at all. It's smooth, it soaks up bumps really well. It's quiet. You could spend 10 hours behind the wheel of this driving to Queensland quite comfortably. Not a complaint in the world, whether it's on the highway driving to Queensland or in the outback on gravel roads, the Birdsville track, Hoodnadata track, any of those sort of roads. The Patrol's not missing out on anything. It doesn't feel like it's 10 years older than this car. And I guess that's really a part of this car not setting the world on fire. This isn't a huge leap forward in any way. It's an evolution of what has always been a good product. The Y62 Patrol might be 10 years old now, and it certainly feels its age compared to the interior of that 200 series, but it's aged in a good way. The Patrol interior is much simpler. You get in here, it's much easier to familiarise yourself with things. The gauges are simple analog ones, the controls are easier. Sure, this centre stack area is a bit busy, there's lots of buttons going on there, but things are much simpler and easier to work with. It's just, I don't know, it's a simple car, but simple in a good way. Yeah, there's a few inherent problems that have been with the Patrol since the Y62 came out. Still no Apple CarPlay, Android Auto in this car. Even after 10 years, you think they might have been able to fit it into them. So yeah, it's a funny old car in that regard, but it's a nice interior to be in. I really feel at home as soon as I get in this car. It's a car that wants to be driven. Like the LandCruiser, it's a car that's perfect for outback miles. You could jump in this and spend 10 hours driving any outback track, any Highway 1, whatever. These cars are made for those conditions. Towing a 3-ton caravan, both these cars will do that with ease. The on-demand 4-wheel drive system in this car works really well. We're just driving around in its normal auto mode now. Don't have to worry about anything, just climb up a hill like this and down the other side. Gives you drive where you need it, when you need it. It's only when you get into some loose rocky stuff or some mud that you want to lock it into either four-wheel drive, high or low range, depending on the terrain. The two hallmarks of the Y62 that really differentiate it from all the Patrols in the past, but also make it such a great thing now, are its superb 5.6 litre V8 engine and its all independent suspension. Compared to the LandCruiser, this is almost a sports car. It handles better, it drives flatter, the engine is more responsive, gets up and goes, makes a sound that you love to hear. It is a sweet package. And dynamically, where the LandCruiser would wallow around a bit and bounce if you try and drive it hard, the Patrol feels like a rally car. It's a car that relishes hard driving. It wants to get up and go, wants to be driven hard. The sound of that V8 engine makes you want to put your foot down. You've just got to think about the fuel pump there, and you don't want to be doing that too often. Drive this car smoothly on the highway, and it really rewards you in fuel economy. It's not that bad. It's around town when you're driving them in the suburbs that they start to chew the juice a bit more. And that's something that a lot of people will not want to go near one of these because you can't get it with a diesel engine. It's purely up to you. Me, I love driving this engine. Just the way it drives in any conditions. It's the independent front and rear, still has enough wheel travel for most off-road situations. It's got more ground clearance than the LandCruiser on our set-piece hill climbs. When you're coming back down, the LandCruiser grounds its diff out coming down the hill. No such thing with this Patrol. It came down smooth and quiet, just didn't touch the ground at all. It's got plenty of wheel travel, doesn't use any height adjustment, any fancy hydraulics, nothing to go wrong there. Once again, it's that simplicity of this car that makes it, in my mind, a winner. This Patrol with its naturally aspirated V8 engine, no turbochargers, no DPFs, no winter coolers, a simple suspension system. It's a no-fuss vehicle. Yes, it has hydraulic body motion control, but even again, it's still a very simple system. It's not high-tech. It's not something that's been shown to fail or go wrong. 10 years on, we've had it now, and it's been a great system. That allows the car to sit nice and flat on roads when you want to push it hard, have it on. It still softens up the corners when you want that wheel articulation off-road. And really, when you think about that $30,000 price difference between these two cars, it really brings that to the fore. Interior wise, these two cars don't miss out on much. They've both got powered, heated, cooled seats. Much more room in this Patrol than you have in the LandCruiser, particularly in the back seat and the third row seat and behind that third row seat. That's where you really notice it. Sure, the LandCruiser has a much bigger screen in the middle here, but the size of your map screen is still pretty much the same. I really worry about the future of Patrol, whether Nissan is going to be able to bring out a new model of this car. As I say, it's 10 years old now. It took Toyota 14 years to bring out a new LandCruiser. Will Nissan have the resources and the finances to bring out a new car? An all-new Patrol is yet to be seen. And certainly the future of this naturally aspirated V8 engine. Once again, we're not seeing any engines of that kind come out. Everything's going smaller, turbocharged. Even V8s are getting smaller from the Europeans, and the Americans even now are bringing out double overhead cam, smaller capacity engines, which is not what this Patrol is all about. The future of cars like this is very limited, and it'll be a bad thing when this car disappears. I hope Nissan can keep this Patrol as it is now for as long as possible. Maybe update a few things inside here, give it a bit more of a modern feel in here, but as for the mechanical package and the suspension, this thing is spot on. I love it. Interestingly, though, they've both got a very different character. The 300 series is still very much a Land Cruiser. It's big, soft, supple, really wants to ride along those country roads for mile after mile. Whereas the Patrol, even though it's 10 years old now, it's got a more sporting character. It's stiffer in its suspension, it rides nice, it wants to be driven hard. That V8 engine just loves it. There are two clinchers here as to what car is going to be right for you. If fuel economy is an issue for you, you're going to want the diesel engine, and that means the Land Cruiser. That new V6 engine is sweet, economical and powerful. But if you want performance, the V8 petrol Patrol is the car for you. And when you think about that, it's $30,000 cheaper, there's almost no argument. Personally, I prefer the sporting nature of this car, and that 30 grand will buy you a lot of fuel or a trip around Australia.